Hello, everyone.
Hi.
The Law Scholar Show.
I'm Ure.
And I'm Jordan.
And I'm Selena.
And we are the Law Scholars, part of a group called Clever Communities in Action.
As scholars, a few months ago, we came together to read and dissect the book, The Color of Law, which was really talking a lot about redlining and the implications of redlining. And so now we're back to start our interview portion of the Law Scholar program, where we can really connect with the community firsthand and those who have the power to help with the displacement of Black people with the St. Paul's area.
Yes. So during that process, we broke down the chapters of the book and discussed the implications of redlining locally for focusing on Norfolk, Virginia. And last week, we did our first live interviews, and then we're continuing that this week with Delegate Jackie Glass and attorney Sarah Black.
And as young Black African-American children, we strive to educate others. And today we will be doing that by bringing forth the opinions of those in our community.
Yes. So we are part of an overarching nonprofit called Clever Communities in Action. And Clever Communities in Action has some other programs that were in place last summer, such as the Virtual Village Show, which was kids teaching other kids. It was really cool. It was promoting culturally affirming literature. We just finished the 5th season, and the 6th season is coming soon. And would you guys like to talk about one of our other ones?
Yeah, so we have Read to Lead, and Clever Communities has distributed over 3,000 culturally affirming books to dozens of Title I elementary school libraries in Hampton Roads and Flint, Michigan, granting access to over 7,000 elementary school students since 2011. So,
go ahead.
Oh, nope.
Okay, so yeah, Read to Lead is a school-based initiative that promotes literacy, positive self-esteem, and cultural awareness through literature with a focus on African-American students. The LEAD acronym stands for Learn Everything About the Diaspora. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so we are very big on culturally affirming actions. And the African diaspora obviously means a lot to us. It's who we are. And as you can see on our shirts, we have a Fawahodi symbol and a Adinkra symbol. Do you guys want to talk more about that?
Yeah, so the Adinkra symbol, this Adinkra symbol is called the Fawahodi, meaning independence, and Adinkra symbols are visual symbols from West Africa with historical significance, originally printed on cloth which royals wore to important ceremonies.
Yeah.
And so with that, I think we want to introduce our guest for today. Up first, we have Sarah Black. You want to introduce yourself a little bit before I get into the interview?
Sure. So I'm Sarah Black. I'm the Deputy Director and Director of Litigation at the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia. We're a nonprofit law firm that represents low-income Virginians in civil matters like housing discrimination and also eviction defense, housing conditions. We do a lot of work in domestic violence, consumer protection. You name it, we probably do it. We don't do traffic, we don't do straight personal injury, and we don't do criminal matters. But we do everything else.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us here tonight. That's so cool what you do. And I know personally, I really want to get involved with that law stuff. That's why we're all part of this program. We all have our reasons, but that's really cool.
Yeah, and so up next, we're going to introduce Delegate Jackie Glass. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit beforehand.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me, Selena, Jordan, and Ure. So I'm Delegate Jackie Glass, one of the newest members of our state legislators. the House of Delegates. I represent the western, central, southern portions of the city of Norfolk. And so right now I'm in Richmond doing that small piece of this job as it's part-time, right? Um, Doing budget stuff and passing bills and passing laws. And hopefully when this all ends in March 12th, we'll be back on the ground doing the good work, right? Working with people like you guys to make our city better.
Mhm. That's amazing. I remember during my time, I was a House of Delegates page like in 8th grade. Yeah, I remember. I mean, you weren't there then, I don't think.
No.
But yeah, it was a great time. Sadly, I was during the short session, but had a blast. And it was really educational too, to like really learn how the process works and
Yeah. Thank you for your service, because that's a big deal. That's a lot of service.
stuff. Thank you.
Yes. So to start, it will be Selena conducting the interviews, and then we will transition into more of just a group discussion. So, yeah, I think to start, Mr. Jordan has a question, I guess pertaining to Attorney Black, but you got it from here, Selena.
All right, so Mr. Jordan really wanted to know how you guys support the Legal Aid Society's important work.
So I mean, I can say anybody can support our work, and we're certainly grateful to the state of Virginia for the support that they provide to our state funder. We're funded through different grants, and then of course anybody who might care to give a donation. But the other thing that's really helpful always is people who are willing to volunteer at our office. We have two offices, two main offices, one in Hampton and one in Norfolk. And we cover all of Eastern Virginia from, Williamsburg to Matthews and Middlesex to the Eastern Shore to Norfolk, Chesapeake, and Virginia Beach and Portsmouth. So Newport News and Hampton.
I was going to ask, what kind of volunteering is that? Like, what does that entail?
So we have all kinds of volunteers. Of course, we always welcome lawyer volunteers who will take pro bono cases for us. We also have had lots of interns who help with the administration of the office and, supporting attorneys in whatever capacity. So it could be outreach, it could be filing, it could be could be anything.
So Delegate Glass, basing off this question, how do you think people can really support getting their message out, like onto the floor if they can't vote, people at like my age?
Well, I'm going to tell you, one of your colleagues here has done a really amazing job at kind of showing how that can happen. So Ure, as she pops back in here,
He
has direct experience, right, with doing this. And I'll say you're probably one of the loudest voices at the ages that you guys are at. So one thing you can do is you can always reach out, call, email your legislator. And in Ure's case, I think she reached out to all the legislators. It is, you are invited in, but we also work for you, right? As a non-voting resident, like we work for you. So I would say the best way you can do it is find out. You can go to the Virginia General Assembly.virginia.gov page and find out exactly who is your legislator. You can reach out onto, and you don't even have to have an issue to reach out, because sometimes making contact before you even know that you need something, just so somebody says, hey, I know your name, Selena, now, right? So when you reach out to me again, I'm like, oh, I remember Selena, thank you, but that's the easiest way. And if you're as motivated like someone like Ure, you can come up to Richmond while we're here. So I think I've seen her 3 times since two times since I've been here. And also when I was locally, I met Ure. So know that we're only here a finite amount of time, eight weeks out of the year, and there are 52 weeks in a year. So meeting them when they're back home or making a touch point like you would your friends, because I've gotten texts from teenagers as well.
Okay, so my first question, I mentioned before that as law scholars, we came together to dissect the color of law. Are you guys familiar with that book, Color of Law?
Yes.
Have you guys read it?
I have not, but I am familiar with it.
I'm going to tell you, I've started the book 3 times, right? I recommend it. I always recommend it because it's a lot to chew on. It's a dense book, and I'm shout out to you guys for getting through it. But it's a lot to take in, and also feeling very connected to these issues. It's a little heartbreaking in its own way. It's learning about de jure and de facto racism. It was tough. It was a tough bet of just having your eyes wide open. But I haven't finished it.
Do you want to open up a little bit? Because you said you felt connected to the book and how it happened. So do you want to open up a little bit on your personal connection to the book?
No, it's not a personal connection. It's just, I think oftentimes as a Black person in this world, you're wondering why things are the way they are, right? Like what, how did what were the chain reaction that caused us to be at this spot? Now we can start back at slavery or enslavement, but like right now, like I'm the first post as Miss Starr says, I got this from her, the first post Jim Crow member of my family. My mother was born when Jim Crow was around, right? Like just wrapping our minds around what is, why it is, and getting clarity. It's liberating, but also heartbreaking because you want to know where you go from here. And I think the book does a good job of opening one's mind up to the why, because we're not crazy.
No, I really relate to that too, because while growing up, I knew that it was happening. I never knew exactly why or how intentional it was. And I can also relate because my dad was really young during the Jim Crow stuff too. So the stories that he has is just really heartbreaking. But Miss Sarah, since you're in the field of legality, what have you really seen that kind of shows that Black displacement is still very much intentional in today's time?
Yeah, so I think probably quite a lot of what I see and the firm sees shows that. I mean, most notably in Norfolk, there is what's happening out at Tidewater Gardens and St. Paul's, and the anticipated probably future closures of Young's Terrace and Calvert Square, which are on the horizon. They're not here yet, but certainly they're being contemplated actively by the city. And so what I really see is which I'm sure you've talked about, is the effects of gentrification when land becomes valuable, as it has in downtown Norfolk, as that land has increased in value, the effort to really bring a different set of residents into the area, to the extreme detriment of the current residents. So, I mean, I'd say Tidewater Gardens is classic gentrification in a lot of ways. And sort of ironically enough, it was one of the first public housing projects in the United States. And so
now here we are, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, what really inspired you to get into this field, both of you? Like what? Yeah. Either one of you can go first.
I'll say for me, it's my spouse says that I love conflict. And I tend to agree with him at this point, right? Because I think that not all conflict is bad, right? At some point, Selena, you'll be trying to figure out what college do I go to? Or what do I do with my life? That's a form of conflict. But what brought me to, I think, this point has always been some form of conflict, good or bad, within my own space and place and trying to find solutions. And so my journey started probably way, way long ago. But the first time I ran for office was because there was a conflict. There was a policy conflict with my school system. And I was like, how can I help? So it has always been for me, what inspires me, one is the kindness of strangers, because you need people to say, hey, you might be the right person to do the job. Two, we can go fast, we can go further together, right? Like I truly believe that. And three, that I don't believe that I can change the world, but I believe that working with the right people, we can change our corner of the world. And so I feel like I'm in the business of people, in the business of happy, but also in the business of creating change for whatever that looks like in my corner of the world. And I love that.
It's a really powerful thing you just said. But what about you, Miss Sarah?
I think, like all my life, I would just say reflexively, fairness has been very important to me, just personally, and then growing up and seeing the unfairness in our world. So I think everybody who becomes a legal aid attorney is probably in it for the justice. And the idea of justice is some kind of basic fairness. We may not achieve that. In fact, probably we often don't, but I think it's what we're all looking for. And then I think, I've come to really, I deeply value all my neighbors and my fellow residents and my client communities. And I feel like they're very undervalued by City Hall in ways that are perplexing and I don't quite understand. And so it's really important to me to help my client communities and my clients have a voice. And I think their voice is valuable and equally valuable as anybody else's voice, even another person who makes more money. I don't think, being rich or poor should mean your voice is more or less valuable.
Yeah.
I'm going to do an exclamation mark on that, Sarah. Put an exclamation mark on it.
What kind of things have you seen your neighbors go through? Or when you said you grew up seeing it personally, what kind of things did you see? Or you were just aware?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think I would say my most formative experience is I left a sort of liberal bubble. I grew up in a pretty liberal bubble, and I started teaching high school. I started teaching high school Latin in a urban school district. And that was like the most politicizing, transforming, heartbreaking thing I ever saw. And I really realized that the story we tell ourselves about our country is perhaps not accurate. Heartbreakingly not accurate. I wish it were true. I wish, opportunities were spread equally for everybody, but they're not. And I think probably I would say it was my time as a classroom teacher when I saw what my students struggled with, that I really hadn't even imagined that was a thing. I was pretty naive when I came out of my liberal bubble. So.
So you worked with kids. What kind of inspired you to do this interview?
Well, I think I'm always happy to help anybody, in any way I can. I mean, I can say obviously as a former teacher, I'm always really excited to help support students and the process of learning and exploring. And I think also as a legal aid attorney, I'm glad to do anything to get out the message and the awareness about why our world is the way it is. Because a lot of what redlining can explain, and certain, policy choices explain, is why certain people's experience is what it is. Because, I definitely know that a low-income person's experience, from what I've observed as an attorney, is very different from what maybe a middle-class person might experience. And that obviously that's a fundamental unfairness I can't abide by, but it's definitely, and, race plays into that too, I think, also.
Yeah. So Delia Glass, what kind of made this interview stand out to you, or made you really want to do it?
So one, I already believe in the mission of CCAA, right? That's a whole thing. And then also recognizing that when certain people call, you answer, right? And I think as an adult or an elder millennial, I like to say that if I've learned anything from the little citizens in my life, the young adults in my life, is that that we need to listen more. We need to talk less, and we need to be attentive, and as adults, and then we also need to share space.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this was an opportunity to share space with you all, to hopefully listen, conversate, and grow in this thing together, because I think we all have common interests here. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah's playing. She's talking about she was a Latin teacher. I pick that up. Hold that in your hands. That she said she went to, and you said an urban environment teaching Latin. That's a whole thing. Thank you for your service.
Okay, so Miss Sarah, so would you really like to elaborate on what's really going on with the gentrification in St. Paul's area, since you're working firsthand with that?
Sure. So I also see a comment here. I don't know if it's on everybody's screen, but I can certainly weave that in. So right now where we're at in St. Paul's is in conjunction with the New Virginia Majority, an attendance group in the community, residents of the St. Paul's Quadrant, and some really brave individuals.
Mm-hmm.
That coalition was able to bring a lawsuit against the city and the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority about the Tidewater Gardens St. Paul's transformation plan. And that case settled, this fall, sort of late fall. And I think it settled, I wouldn't call it Rawlsian justice, or like justice is fairness, or fairness for the community. But I think, we won a lot of really good things for the community. It's a better deal than it was before the lawsuit, but a lot of work remains to be done, and the work in that community is not over. And this gets to, I think, Mr. Jordan's point, is one of the most concerning things happening in that community right now is that, this CNI project was supposed to bring a lab school and improve educational opportunities and et cetera, et cetera. But so far, all it's done is the city has taken Tidewater Park Elementary School, and they are now going to shunt those students into Ruffner. So that will be a 3 through 8 school now. And I think that is just an abomination. Like, I don't even know quite how to describe that.
Mm-hmm.
But mixing 3rd graders to 8th graders, I think is probably not pedagogically justified from an educational policy standpoint. And, it's also not what that community was promised. It makes life harder for residents in Youngs and Calvert. Young students now have to it was already a long walk to Tidewater Park from Youngs Terrace, and it's a longer walk now. And it's not a particularly safe walk. And, I invite the city of Norfolk, if anybody's listening from this city, to look at different elementary schools and how many crossing guards are allocated to different elementary schools, and go look at the 3 or 4 crossing guards at the Hampton Boulevard. And I'm all for crossing guards. I'm not saying take away crossing guards, but I'm saying, school, you just look at the way communities are resourced, and it's maddening when you see some communities get so much and some communities really, really struggle. And I think closing Tidewater Park, forcing those kids on that long walk to hang out with 8th graders when they're in 3rd grade is not just. And the community was promised a lab school. And a lab school is a model school, which is supposed to be trying out the latest educational techniques.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the community was promised. And what they're getting instead is, something that I think most people in education would probably say is a failed model. So that's one thing that's going on in St. Paul's, like as an example of like current issues for that community. So I would say, you know, the lawsuit moved the needle in some really important ways, but a lot of work, justice work, remains to be done for that community. And, you know, what I expect is they're hoping everybody who lives in St. Paul's at the end of the day is probably like a yuppie or a guppy or whatever they're calling young urban professionals these days. And they won't ever have to have a lab school. Or they're going to bring the lab school in when the community is already different and the current residents won't be there to benefit from it. And I just think, you know, things like that are wrong.
So would you argue that even though the people of that community were promised better, they're kind of off worse than they were before?
I think with regards to the closure of Tidewater Park, for sure. I would also say I think people were offered a false bill of goods initially. You know, the housing choice vouchers, which is predominantly how people are relocated out of Tidewater Park. I don't know if you can stop me. You got to stop me because I'm kind of like a housing, so I could go on and on. But a housing choice voucher is where the tenant has like the promise from the government that the government will pay part of their rent, and they take that around and they have to try to find a landlord. But what we see is like for a lot of neighborhoods, they're too expensive for vouchers. The vouchers do, you know, have a cap for how much rents can be. Another thing we see definitely is that I've had many clients over the years tell me they've been told like, oh, you know, this is not a voucher neighborhood, or, oh, you need to, you know, this neighborhood over here is for people with vouchers. Or, you know, there's any number of ways people with vouchers are discriminated against. And sometimes it's a proxy for, I think, racial discrimination. And sometimes I think it's a proxy for just, we don't want any low-income person in our neighborhood. But one thing that's done in Norfolk, because Norfolk's a highly segregated city, is like a voucher is only generally good, and most of the vouchers in the city only go to certain neighborhoods that are distressed. They're already distressed neighborhoods. And to the extent there's any housing available in those neighborhoods, and it's an extremely tight housing market in Norfolk, you know, you're just kind of moving poverty out of St. Paul's into other poor neighborhoods. You are not moving people in St. Paul's to true neighborhoods of opportunity. And if you look at the city's own numbers, like only I think slightly less than 30% by the city's own numbers have moved to quote unquote areas of opportunity, you know, which are supposed to be integrated and not with a concentration of poverty. You know, so the promise of the CNI, you know, I think has not materialized for people.
So, Delegate Glass, you are an elected official. What is the main message that you kind of want to relay to your colleagues right now?
My colleagues are in the General Assembly, right? Like, so this is when we talk about what's happening with housing here, some of the things that we are honing in on. And like I said, we just voted on a budget, which I voted against because there was a lot of money taking, not the funding wasn't right for a housing trust, right? Which is a way we work to making sure that we have affordable housing. But the messages that we send here across the aisle comes through the way that we vote, right? We have these conversations with each other. However, it boils down to finding common ground, but also voting in a way that it works for your community. And the affordable housing piece is a huge part of what we have. I think Norfolk is number 7 for the eviction rates here. And when we look at the types of displacement, because that's the word you used earlier, and I'll stick with it, is that there are three kinds of displacement happening in our city right now. There's direct displacement, meaning we're getting priced out. There's indirect displacement, and that's to Sarah's point, where it's like there's some discriminatory policies, like we don't take housing vouchers. And then there's cultural displacement, where you see businesses coming up around certain kinds of shops and things that ultimately take away from the culture of a neighborhood, pushing all the other folks out. What we've got to do is we have to come to a place where gentrification is happening without displacement. Does that make sense? What I mean by that is that, and I'm saying it so that we're not using gentrification as a bad word. It is perfectly normal and natural to upgrade a community, right? To invest, to revitalize without removing the indigenous residents, right?
Right.
We can do it. It's been shown to be possible. And so if we're going to do it, and we're going to do a better job here in our space and place, is it's going to take some foresight and planning. It's going to take some recognizing that, Norfolk is 97% developed, right? Like, we know this. However, we're seeing things, we're seeing projects, we're seeing where we can build up, and we are building up. And having those things available before we make decisions to shift people, and having ways to sort of track how we're shifting, because what's hurting the most, right? An elected official may look at it as, hey, my voting block is ultimately changing, but you know who and what is hurting the most? It's our youngest citizens, right? Like, as they move from place to place to place, or they have to regroup. What I'm seeing in my neighborhood is that some of the folks that are coming into the neighborhood that I live, they've lost their infrastructure, right? The neighbor that used to watch the kids, just being able to talk to people, like, it's different. Living in a housing a project is different from living in a single family home community. There's different, you didn't come with a lawnmower, you didn't come, like, all these different things, and that there's a level of support that we can have, and having patience and empathy, and working that empathy muscle with our neighbors that are moving from that are finding places here in our city. But to Sarah's point, many are not finding a place, right? I know people that have gone as far as Nevada with their voucher, right? Down to Atlanta with their voucher. So we're definitely, there are some lessons to be learned, and I don't know when this hot wash is coming, but we see this happening. It's not unique here in Norfolk, but also success is not unique. It just takes foresight, planning, and including people early in the process, right? When we know it's happening 4 or 5 years down the road, how do we include people in the process, so that when we start making those decisions and we start shifting, that they are doing it with us rather than it happening to them?
Yeah. One last question for you. You said that there was a lot of steps to be made. Honestly, this is a question for both of you, but what kind of steps do you think could be next, or should be next, and the ones that you think are most reasonable for our time?
So I loved what Delegate Glass said about kind of upgrading without gentrifying neighborhoods.
Me too.
Because I think anybody who lives in Norfolk can see a real disparity in amenities between neighborhoods that is not right. I think that's a place to start. I think also inclusionary zoning, mandatory inclusionary zoning laws. So that would be anytime, there's a substantial rehabilitation of a multifamily dwelling, or they're building a new multifamily dwelling, that they have to include affordable housing within that. And I think the city, recognizing its currently existing obligations under its own city ordinance to fight for fair housing, if they would take that obligation seriously, I think that would help.
and I'll piggyback a bit on what Sarah said. In the Commonwealth, localities have an opportunity to create inclusionary housing policies, right? Unfortunately, some aspects of it doesn't allow it to have teeth. What I mean by teeth is it's like, okay, a developer says I will do 10% of the housing affordable, which, by the way, affordable housing in the city of Norfolk would mean your rent would be a little under $700 based off of median income. And you can't find that anywhere. Actually, when we looked at the data, I think there were like 6 places and like 1 was available. So like just understanding that. But the aspect of of taking steps to hold people accountable when they say they want to build here and having standards, right? Having standards for how we build here is so important. So a huge step, at least in our space and place, would even be having an inclusionary housing policy. Like, what does that mean? What is it? How do we define it? And I will put this out there on Monday. I want to say at 6:00, there is going to be a debriefing of the Mayor's Commission on Social Equity and Economic Opportunity. I had the opportunity to be a part of it, specifically on the health and food insecurity, as well as the housing portion. And it was hard, right? Just to be honest, it was hard getting to the point where we're able to have real conversations, but we did, and we're doing the best that we can. Can we do better? Yep. Yep. So that commission will be sharing their debrief of things that we're sort of trying to get ready to present to council. But I think there's still space for people like yourself who really care, who have ideas, who want to be a part of the process, to show up at that meeting and say, yeah, this is what we need to do. These are the recommendations that we feel like a commission, the Mayor's Commission on Social Equity and Economic Opportunity, needs to be making to our city council.
That was fabulous. With that, I'm going to go ahead and bring on the rest of my teammates for today so I can ask you a few questions of their own.
Hello. So far this discussion has been so interesting and so cool. Like things like this need to just happen more often. I'm really cool that with Clever Communities we were able to do this. It's so cool. But I just had a quick question. I guess it's kind of regarding gentrification. It's very difficult, like from the point of view thinking of like how some of my peers would see the gentrification that occurs in Norfolk. It going to those places that have been gentrified, going to the new like coffee shops and stuff, and the places that like it's so nice there, but when you go look down the street, it's places being torn down, it's people being displaced. And I'm wondering how the best way to kind of combat that, like if it's trying to like enjoy or trying to take part in the things that have displaced people, or I don't know, or to like embrace the fact that the culture is there. I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. But like, I guess what could teenagers or any sort of youth or anyone that's kind of just visiting the area do in order to not take part in the negative actions?
So I think one thing like that has to be acknowledged is like when you look at St. Paul's, that is an area which has been historically under-resourced by the city. So like anything that's next is gonna like on the surface be nicer because the city is giving the money to make it nicer. They're providing now, the neon district, right? Like, and I think that is just goes to like it shouldn't have ever been that way in the first place. It never should have been under-resourced like that in the first place. And I think you can enjoy like a cup of coffee at the coffee shop and still hold your city leaders accountable for the choices they make. Because like everything in Norfolk, everything that goes going down in St. Paul's, that's gone down in St. Paul's has been a specific policy choice by this city.
Oh,
Yeah, delegate classes. Is there anything you wanted to say about that?
I was along the same lines of what what Sarah was saying is, if we're just being fully honest, because as an elected official, I have the expectation of accountability, right? I have the expectation of the things that we do being bold, and I have the expectation that what we do is coalition building, right? Those are my ABCs. And when I look at you all as youth, I want you to know that, like, you do not need to be invited to hold people accountable, to make bold decisions, or to create coalitions. Ray, we've had this conversation, I'll say, with you two ladies and whoever else is watching. I firmly believe that, if you, as a 16-year-old, can drive a car and get a ticket, can work a job and pay taxes, that locally you should have a say in who represents you. Um, this is happening across the country where 16-year-olds are being able to vote in local elections. I think it says something when you're able to be a part of when people have to earn your vote. And it says something too when you all do things like this, right? You're doing this. You're showing up in spaces and places, that ask these very hard questions, because when I'm saying it, I'm just another griping adult. It's the truth. I'm just another person that just got a problem. Here she come. But there's a groundswell that I think collectively you and your team, you don't have to live in Norfolk to care about what's happening in Norfolk. You don't have to live in Virginia Beach to care about what's happening in Virginia Beach. So my suggestion to you would be to do exactly what you know is on your heart. And it's starting right here, right? And that's a fact. It all comes down to accountability. And I think Miss Sarah was alluding to it, is that, if you don't like something or you don't like someone in the job that they're doing, especially in our constitutional democratic republic, the lucky part of that republic piece is that you get to choose who represents you, and they can be value aligned or not. So that's would be my 2 cents.
I'm really proud of the teenagers our age who can. Oh, oops. Sorry, I got a call. But anyway, I was just really proud of the people like our age who are allowed to vote, just because it's really important to me, because it's our future, that we should be able to vote on, because we're going to be the ones living in it.
We're making decisions that's going to affect you guys' lives, as you, like the decisions we make today. By the time you all start really getting into what you're doing as an adult, these decisions are going to directly impact you, probably more than they will me, right?
Yeah.
In a way. So, like, you do not need an invitation. I just want to keep saying that there's no invitation to get people to push people to do the right thing, right? You don't need it. We work for you.
And also because if we were allowed to vote at this age, it would kind of force people in our age group to be more informed on what's going on in society, because there's just so many people that I know that really have no idea what's going on in their government and what's around them. And I feel like if they had the option to really get their voice out there and they know that their opinion matters, they would have to know what's going on, and just overall create a better future for ourselves and our grandkids.
Yeah, Selena, that's I think especially lots of people don't really want to get involved with politics, and it's definitely like a stressful field, I'm sure. But it's like, I think what really got me into it, and one of our mentors, Mr. Rodney Jordan, like on the school board, like those decisions that you don't really know about, they do affect our lives directly, like especially with happening at the General Assembly now, rules on divisive concepts, or even things such as maths. I have friends who have brothers and sisters who are more immunocompromised, and some of these rules are just like difficult for them, and all of these things like really affect us directly. And it's so important to know what's happening to you and know that we have the voice and ability. Like, go to our school board meetings, and that's what all of us do in this program. And I think the education part of it is that that's what we try to give to our peers and stuff. So I think, yeah, Delegate Goss, it's very important and very. I'm really hoping that that initiative pushes forward in our Hampton Roads area. Okay, sorry, but another question for Miss Sarah Black. So I guess I look at everything from an education point of view because I am a teenager, but could you maybe elaborate more on the effects maybe in like the next 5 years that will happen on like high schools in the area and middle schools and elementary schools? I know you touched a bit on elementary schools, but what are you expecting to happen to those schools where people are being displaced?
Well, so I think it's I think Norfolk Public Schools, like the teachers and the personnel, should be really commended for the job that they do. But one thing they don't get a lot of is money. And so, when people are from one distressed community or are forced into another distressed community, it increases the drain on resources. So it's a drain on the resources of those schools to take in, more students in that way. In a way, it would be less distressing if people were moving to true areas of opportunities and schools that, had, more diverse, let's just call a spade a spade. I think in Norfolk, some schools get more money than other schools. And if people are able to move into districts to the schools that get more money, that's like, I would say it's a win for the school and it's a win for the students. I think, diversity is hugely important for everybody. For a variety of reasons. And I think when you don't have that and you have, it just ends up hurting already struggling schools instead of like enriching schools that have plenty to share. And so I think, that's what I would see. I would certainly, I guess while I'm wishing and dreaming, somebody to look at like why our school districting maps, like within Norfolk, are so strangely drawn.
Strange is a choice word, Miss Black.
Yeah.
It's a choice word. I'll say in my community, right? The kindergartners that live in my community go to 4 different high schools. Will end up going to 4 different high schools. And that is wild, right? That is, and we've had conversations about this. And if we know the 2 things that change the trajectory, sort of getting on the baseline of what you guys were talking about here, the 2 things that change the trajectory of somebody's life is their housing and their health. Right? Where you live determines what school you go to. It determines the resources that you have access to. It can also determine how you get to your employment, or what type of employment you have. And then your health, hello, that's just these 2 things. And when you talked about the funding piece, and if I'm looking at it on a state level, we just had this big discussion today about how we tout that we're doing more than we've ever done. It's still not enough. In the city of Norfolk, I think our property taxes pay for the majority of how our city operates, about 34%, whereas in the state, we're given about 31% of the revenue of that contribute to the city. Our city is hurting, and that's not just financially. That's culture-wise. I think you can feel the sense of folks coming here just wanting. It's a fatigue of opportunity. You're just waiting for the opportunity to come. When is it? Just because we know it's a great city. Like, I know Norfolk is it is my chosen hometown, but it's just waiting for it to just reach its full potential and trying to be a part of that that thing that pushes it towards the city that we see up here. And so you guys are needed as we try to make this shift, because I feel it in my chest sometimes, the hurt of my neighbors that may not be in the same community that I'm in, but are across town. Like, it does not feel good to go in those spaces. I think as Sarah, one of you guys said, I can look down the street from a coffee shop and see something different. Yeah, but we go further together. And I'm looking forward to whatever that partnership piece looks like. And I'll tell you from my desk, what we've been doing is trying to find as many public entities or private entities that are willing to partner with our public entities to do good things, right? We're going to have a STEM academy. It should do STEM things. Okay, so what kind of partner can we bring in with this access of this office to make it do those good things? So that's what I'm seeing as the way forward, but always open.
So you mentioned like the city up here. What does that look like for you?
Oh, listen, I'll tell you, I'll just be really honest. I never thought I would live at Norfolk. When I was in the Navy for 11 years, and I avoided Norfolk at all costs. But my husband was stationed here in the 90s, and he just loved it. And he talked about a Norfolk where, and it was specifically about seeing our people. He's like, there are people like us out here doing good things. He was like, this is where you have to be, like living their whole truth and being successful. And that's what I kind of see, is that I want to see, this man said it at a event the other day. He had been incarcerated for years, and he's from the Maryland area. And he said, do you know, I saw Black people mowing lawns. He's like, mowing lawns. He's like, we're not struggling, but we are. So I see it as a place that my children want to raise their children. Like, they're not trying to run away from here like many folks would love to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool place. We are a whole vibe, y'all. Norfolk is a whole vibe. I mean, it is. It's different from the beach. No offense, Ure, but it's it's different, right? It's a feeling. It's culture. So, like, I just want people to be able to find their place and be able to find their place in Norfolk, and not in a place where they're just trying to pass through, but like it feels good to call this home, because sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, there were people in the comments saying thank you guys for your honesty, and like I just want to say, especially with Delegate Glass, I've reached out with so many elected officials that are in Richmond, and like no one has been as honest and genuine as you have, and I could really tell that it's passion, and especially with what Miss Sarah Black is doing, like all of this stems from wanting to do something and like a passion, and that's just so. Not everyone has that compassion and empathy and wanting to do something to like better a community, and it's so genuine. And then, like, you guys who we look up to, it's very, very incredible, very cool. And it's just, thank you so much.
Not really. Thank you so much. Thank you guys were absolutely fabulous, and I think we had a great conversation here. It was so nice to meet you. If you just want to tell our viewers really quickly, like where they could find you, if you had any social medias, or if they have questions they want to ask you personally, how they should reach you.
Sure. So Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia, we have a webpage, www.LASEVA.org. And you can reach me at Legal Aid 627-5423.
And I run all socials under Jackie, and that's JCKIE, the number 4 Norfolk or whatever it is, at Jackie, the number 4 Norfolk. My email here is Del, like delegate, Del, J as in for Jackie, my first name, Glass. So Del J Glass at house.virginia.gov. So that's house, because I'm in the House of Delegates, statevirginia.gov. And you can always reach out to our office, and I'll put this out there and I'll say it twice. It's at 804-698 1089 because we're the 89th district. So while we're in Richmond, but we're only here until March 12th. And when I get back home, hopefully we'll have a home office and a space in place. You're more than welcome to hit us up any given time. I do not have to be your representative for you to reach out. And if need be, I will always willing to connect folks with their direct representative as well.
All right. And you guys can reach us at Clever Communities in Action on Facebook. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like and share. And with that, I just want to say thank you for coming to our incredible guests, and thank you to all our viewers for watching. Love you guys.
I am a law scholar.
I am a powerful force. I use literacy as a weapon for liberation.
I use literacy as a weapon to uncover hidden truth.
I am a young change agent. I have been handed the baton by my ancestors.
I have the support and protection of my community.
I am an asset to my community. I understand that I have the responsibility to empower my community as I choose my path in life. I am a law